Congressman Khanna from California. Nice to see you, sir, at the table, no less.
Good to see you in person.
Okay, so we've been talking all week about SVB and what needs to happen next. But before we even get to the regulatory side, because there's a lot of finger pointing at the regulators and at the supervisors, at the managements of these companies, I'm curious sort of where you think this lands, because I've taken the position, and you can disagree with me, that at some level this entire episode was this remarkably unforced error. There were mistakes made by the management, and I have no sympathy for that. But at the same time, this was like a little, I don't even want to call it a fire. There was a little bit of smoke in the room, and which probably could have been doused with some water. But, people screamed fire in the theater, and everybody ran for the exits.
Look, I put most of the blame on the bank management. I mean, they didn't hedge those long-term bonds. They didn't have the financial sophistication, frankly, that a lot of banks in New York have. And they were vulnerable to very large deposit holders. I mean, look, Bank of America, for example, has millions of accounts, and many of them under 250,000. This had maybe 20, 30 accounts, large accounts of a few VCs say we're concerned it's susceptible to a bank run, and that was irresponsible.
What do you think about the venture capitalists and the Silicon Valley community, though, that oftentimes is talking, very frequently about personal responsibility, and then all of a sudden switches gears when they need help?
Well, that's not consistent. I mean, and that's why I think that depositors need to be protected. I was joking with someone. I said maybe now that they are advocating for a guarantee of depositors, the next step will be a guarantee for health insurance, and we'll turn them into advocates for Medicare for all. But I think this shows that the libertarian philosophy does not work, that there are times that you need government involvement.
Right. But at the same time, the question is, if we do guarantee all of these deposits, what it actually does for, it's the same question we've been asking all morning, what it does for moral hazard, what it does for the type of risk-taking that may therefore come as a result of these guarantees. Is that the unexpected or unresolved issue on the other side of this?
Here's why I think we needed to guarantee the depositors. If you didn't, you'd have 4 banks in this country. Everyone would be pulling their money out of the regional banks and putting it in Bank of America, Citibank, J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, which, by the way, are more or less guaranteed. People think that we would actually support them. We have about $10 trillion in this country that is under FDIC. We have about $8 trillion that is not. And the question is, how do you raise bank premiums in a way to fund that $8 trillion and not have that fee fall on the ordinary deposit account holders, but have a fee on larger accounts? And I think that's something we need to work towards and reform.
Right, but even if there's a bigger fee, there's still this idea that once you have the guarantee, so you could charge people a little bit more to keep their money in the bank. They might not. They might just go to other more risky parts of the financial system that, by the way, blew up in 2008, money market funds and the like. But even if you charge them that fee, if you guarantee it, you don't solve the issue of how banks are going to run their companies, right? How they're going to reach for profit. Even in this case, they could have bought bills instead of longer dated bonds, but they would have made no money. So I don't know how you change that mismatch, that incentive. You're absolutely right. And this is why I think the regional banks need more regulation. I mean, look, SVB lobbied not to have stress tests, not to have liquidity tests. In exchange for having more of a guarantee on the deposit, they need to be open to more regulation, to have basic stress tests and liquidity tests. But here's what the moral hazard argument. I mean, let me guarantee you, there's no one at SVB in the executives who are thinking, great, my life's great, I got away with this. I mean, they're going to face a DOJ investigation, an SEC investigation. Rightfully, their careers are ruined. I think most regional banks are not want to go bankrupt. So let me ask you about First Republic. This was hardly the only problematic California bank, in part because of the high proportion of uninsured deposits. Some of the issues there. First Republic is down again. It's around $23 a share, but the declines that we've seen haven't stopped, and there's reports this morning about it potentially being involved in a sale. Can you comment on what you think would or wouldn't be appropriate in resolving this? And the fact that this still bleeding means that the measures taken so far haven't actually totally stopped this problem. I believe what Secretary Yellen and Powell did was extraordinary, and I do think it's going to stem the bleeding. I wish they had gotten there Saturday, but they got there in time on Sunday evening. And what they've said is, if you have a Treasury bond, we're going to value it in terms of the liquidity at what it's currently at full value. It's not at the discounted rate.
I do think that that's going to be enough to stop some of the bleeding. And I think they've been they deserve a lot of credit, in my view, of how they've handled it.
Why isn't the market giving them more credit this morning? Because if they had handled the issue, First Republic shouldn't be down another 25%.
Well, First Republic originally on Monday came back up. And look, people are anxious. I mean, you had Silicon Valley Bank collapse. You had Signature collapse. There is an understandable anxiety.
Should the guarantee, let's put it this way, be expanded to more, for instance, municipal bonds? So at par, we're currently talking about, I think, in the facility, treasuries, mortgage-backed securities, but I don't think munis, for instance, would be part of that. Are we going to have to see this guarantee expand as the types of assets that are problematic at various different banks also continues to expand, if it does?
I think everything has to be on the table. My sense is that this should be enough, but my view, seeing how Secretary Yellen and Chair Powell took action, is they will expand it if it's necessary. I mean, look, here's the thing. When someone is bleeding, when there is someone who is having an emergency, what you have to do is stop the bleeding. And everyone is saying, well, what principle? And I get that. But ultimately, you got to first stop the bleeding, and then we can debate the principle.
Can I say this about look, I'm the first person to say you got to stop the bleeding. I thought you needed to do the bailouts in 2008. It was a very unpopular position to have. I think you had to do what you did this weekend. I think the problem, though, is we've become a nation of bailouts, and at the same time, we're unwilling typically to pay for them. So we get into these situations where we socialize the losses, I say it over and over again, we privatize the gains, the folks who are making the most money ultimately don't pay for it on the other end, and then we sit around and say we don't have enough money to do anything. And that's the problem. And so to me, the question is, until you can get to a point where the people who actually are going to lose realize they're going to lose and they have to pay for it, we have to figure out some. Talk about moral hazard. That's the ultimate moral hazard that we're living in right now.
And I think it's fair. And I think there are a lot of people that share your sentiment. There are a couple things that we need to do. We need to make sure clearly here that the shareholders and executives lose, that there's a clawback of the executives' compensation and bonus. I mean, the fact that they're making millions of dollars is outrageous. The second thing is we have to have more regulations. Right. We can't have deregulation. And the third thing is have a higher premium on the high deposit accounts. You talk to a lot of these companies, and they'll say, well, pay more to make sure that we have more insurance.
Before you go, TikTok, what do you think?
I'm pleased with what the administration has done, which is to say, let's force the sale. They've given the Chinese companies a choice. Either sell it or they have to leave. That seems fair.
And what do you think the longer-term implication is for the relationship between the U.S. and China as a function of this decision?
China cares about one thing, which is our one China policy. I just led a bipartisan delegation to Taiwan. I met with President Tsai, and we need to make sure that they have the defense, but at the same time, we need to have engagement and affirm the one China policy, which is the status quo. Right. And that, I think, is the critical.
And you don't think that China's going to say, "Hey, Nike, we've got a problem now. Hey, Starbucks, we got a problem. Hey, Apple, by the way, in your state, we got a problem here. This isn't going to work the way it used to anymore because you folks are." Playing hardball in a way that we didn't expect.
Well, no, they can't. I wish they had more focus on their domestic production. I wish they had actually a service economy. They're so over-reliant on an export economy. We have a $400 billion trade deficit. Let me tell you, they need us a lot more than we need them. And so this is starting to rebalance things.
And I assume your constituents, including Mark Zuckerberg, are very happy today.
Why is that?
Well, because who's the benefit? If TikTok gets either shut down or sold, who's the winner?
Well, look,
Silicon Valley.
It may not.
Evan Spiegel at Snap is you know.
Maybe they're LA, but yeah.
That's a fair point. It may not be. I hope it's not Facebook that gets the new TikTok. It could be someone else. I mean, there could be a new entrepreneur ready to build.
I'm going to follow you on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I don't, I do already.
We follow each other.
We follow each other. We're followers.